Hey guys, welcome to the Hot Tub Club where inspiration bubbles up. I'm your host, Samara Renee, and today we are with Cathleen Elle, an amazing entrepreneur, sharing her story and how to deal with grief. I'm excited about this episode. It's very timely. Make sure to subscribe to my podcast to stay up to date on all of our new episodes that are coming up. So, with that, enjoy the podcast.
Thank you so much for joining me and for your time to share your story. The whole point of me starting this podcast is to have conversations with not only women, but also men about how self-care shows up in their life and the ways or situations that brought upon their new self-care lifestyle. Introduce yourself. Give us a little bit about your background.
I'm Cathleen Elle, and today I get to be a guide for people who have gone through life-shattering events. I help them walk through the pain of any of those events so where they can live a fulfilled life.
The great thing about our conversation today is when we were at our Breakthrough to Success event this weekend, I was going around the room during our exercises to get ideas from people. I ended up coming across one of the guys, I forgot his name, but he was a director. One of his suggestions was talking about grief. What kind of things in self-care can you do to support men, but also women when they're grieving? That's amazing for a man to be able to come and be open and say that you have gone through a traumatic event in your life dealing with grief. There were two other moms that were there that also lost children. I thought we could touch upon that because that's such a part of your story and could help so many people that are going through the same thing.
Right. As far as grief goes, grief comes in every form there is. No one is going to escape this life without having some grief in their life. It doesn't have to necessarily be as traumatic as mine. My son took his life, and that was really traumatic for me, but it also shattered me open. So where I could step into my own journey of healing. Or it could be a divorce or a job loss or an unexpected health diagnosis. It could be anything at all. Or it could be a pet dying. It could be any grief in everything we do. The importance here is that while there may be experiences that we have that causes grief, we have an opportunity to step into the feelings that are caused from that experience. So where it doesn't get trapped in your body and you end up isolating or cutting yourself off from other people. Some of the self-care things that I did when I first started going through my grieving journey was one, breathing, really focusing on my breath. When we focus on our breath, I have like what's called the grief prescription. So there's 3 B's. One is be in the moment. Because when you're in the middle of the grief, oftentimes you're either going backwards and regurgitating all the things of what if only, I should have, I could have. And so it causes a lot of guilt and judgment and all of that stuff. And so I was like, if you're in the moment, you're not living in the past, which causes depression because you're judging yourself so much. And you're not living into the future because when you're projecting too far out into the future in the way that you're feeling in this moment, you cause anxiety because you can't see or feel that it can be any different in the future because you're so into it. So you're be in the moment, focus on your breath. So really practice breath work. And you don't even have to close your eyes. You can do this in a meeting. You can do it when you're walking or driving. Practice the four squared breath practice. Is where you breathe into the count of 4, you hold it to the count of 4, you release it to the count of 4, and then hold it to a count of 4. And do that 4 times in a row. That will help you bring yourself back into the moment. So if you feel like you're projecting or you're looking back and you're getting anxious, feels like it's more painful, bring yourself back to your breath. That will help you breathe better. And the third is believe. Believe that it's not always going to be this way. That you're supported. Believe that if someone has, their soul has risen, it doesn't mean they're gone.
Right.
Their physical presence is no longer here, and you get to explore how you can create a new relationship with the energy of your loved ones.
That's so good. Love the simplicity of how you explain that because everyone grieves in such a different way. it really depends on the event. For instance, like when my aunt passed away, many of our family members passed away within the past couple of years. It was a different experience because of, I know her spirituality and how she led her life and the conversations that we had. That connection was still there. As she transitioned to the next part of her journey, that we would still have that spiritual connection. I had a different process when one of my childhood friends died from suicide. That was because our relationship was a little different. I didn't see him a lot after we became adults, but I really had a hard time with that because the way he died was just a traumatic event. He was buried on my birthday. It's heavy, but I'm trying to remember him and the positive, loving light of who he is and not the way that his life ended.
I heard a question within that is
Yeah, absolutely.
the difference in grieving. And even though you're the person who's experiencing the different types of grief, you're grieving differently.
Mm.
And that is normal. Everyone grieves differently at every point that you have a grieving experience.
Mhm.
So it's dependent on your relationship. And oftentimes when it comes to suicide, and I can speak from my experience and all the clients that I've worked with around suicide or drug overdoses with parents, specifically parents, there's a lot of guilt left because there is a sense that parents have this responsibility. And you can use this as friends or siblings or whatever you want. But I know that it's very different when it comes to the choices of overdose or suicide. It's a very different process. So sudden unexpected loss causes a more complicated grief because you have no chance to say goodbye. You have no chance to right your wrongs.
Right.
And then you focus, the person who's grieving, the one that's left behind, we tend to focus on all the things that went wrong and how we could have shown up differently.
Absolutely.
The fact is, I love Peter Crone. I don't know if you know him or not, but he's an amazing transformational leader. And one of his quotes, I just live by it. It's, if it happened, then it couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't. So the experience is the experience. And the experience gives us the opportunity to go in deeper where we're judging ourselves or we're feeling less of ourselves or where we're holding the untruths that of the programs or patterns or limiting beliefs where we're holding those untruths. We can free our soul from those untruths.
I love that. Free your soul from the untruths. That's amazing. And, going back to transformational leaders, I was wondering, how did you get connected with Jack Canfield and some of his teachings?
When I was younger, In Soup for the Soul books were very popular in my era. So I knew who he was, and I had left my husband in 2017, still working at my executive position. And in 18, at the beginning of the year, there was a one day to greatness that Jack was leading in Boston. I just was like, it was a pretty inexpensive trip. It was close to where I was living. And I'm like, I love him and I just want to go see him. Like, it's one day, so why not? And when I went to One Day of Greatness, it was like this aha went off inside me, his E plus R equals O formula. And for those who are listening, it is an experience plus your action, your response equals the outcome, which means how you're going to live your life. And the only control or any ability to change the formula that we have is how we respond or react. Mm-hmm. And why that was so important to me, it was like this, like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I did. Because when I was laying on my son's grave after his soul left his body, I literally, like 3 or 4 months afterwards, I was laying on his grave, just begging, pleading, wishing, whoever, whatever, took my son, please take me too. And I was a wreck. And suddenly, like, my body became calm, and I hear this, and I like almost instantly stop crying, and I hear this like voice come through my head and say, if this happened in your life, then you're meant to do something with it. Now go do it.
Wow.
It was in that moment that I had this realization, my reaction or my response is going to change the way I'm moving through this grief. And so it was then that I was like, okay, I have the contacts, I was a legislator, so I had the outlets, the media outlets that I could be the voice for suicide awareness and the signs of suicide. So I stepped into it differently. And so it was just that awareness, like I've been doing this and I didn't even know it. And what else is happening in my life that I'm walking through life unconsciously and create, just in a program from my teachings as a kid. And so it was then that I decided to step into the work deeper.
Love that so much. And you touched on a little bit about your career before, and I know that you were very successful working in the world. And tell us a little bit about your career and also like your self-care practices during that time. Was self-care a priority for you? And if not, what was your lesson from your life then as being a working woman out in the world versus where you are now, which is more in tune with yourself?
Love that question. So, my history really was from a fairly abusive alcoholic family as a child. So I had a program in my mind and my body that I was unworthy, not lovable. I had this belief. And I remember as a very young girl feeling, when my mom's being beaten with blood, flowing out of her mouth and her nose. And I remember thinking, there's got to be something more in this world than this. There's got to, this be what life is about as a young child. And so it was almost like I made a commitment in that moment that this isn't how I'm going to live my life.
Right.
And so for most of my life, I was constantly seeking on the outside to fill the void on the inside. So I was a successful career woman. That I, was a legislator before I was the age of 30. I didn't have a college degree and I knew nothing about politics, but I knew that I wanted to get involved to help give people a voice who thought they didn't have a voice.
Right.
But I didn't realize that was the case at the time, So I served on judiciary for 8 years. I named the law civil union. I wrote with the committee the civil union law, which gave gay rights and responsibilities. So where people can marry now, or equal rights and responsibilities. Through all of that, I was there for 8 years. I worked for the governor for 7 years. And then I became an executive at a commercial contractors association, the largest commercial contractors association in Vermont, and was a lobbyist. So 25 plus years of my life, I served from a place of proving my worth.
Right.
And then when Logan took his life, my life changed in the split second. Just like anyone else's who has lost someone suddenly and unexpectedly, your life is never the same again. It instantly changes in that moment. And so I decided to just invest in my own growth, because what I realized through my cognitive thought therapy and the energy healing and the mediumship and like all the stuff that I was doing and being involved in is that I was carrying a lot of post-traumatic stress from my childhood.
Yes.
And so, how I was operating was not from my soul. It was from the, proving. And so today, because I've stepped into this healing journey and became a master of a healing process and master coach and all that other stuff, I decided that I realized I was serving from ability, obligation, and need to be seen, because no matter how far I climbed on the professional ladder, it was never enough. I was never enough. I needed to do more and more and more. That void was never filled. In 2018, I left my job. I left my home state, moved 1,500 miles away, and started a business that actually filled my soul. So today I get to serve from my heart, and knowing that I get to be the light in the world, and just like I serve from the knowingness that we all have a purpose and we all belong no matter where we are.
I love how you are sharing that, and I can see your whole face, your whole being lights up. I love that. And I think that's the uniqueness about what Jack does and so many other transformational leaders do, is they help you find that light within that's been buried, and they help to bring that to life and help you grow so you can be a light to other people. It's just wonderful just to see your eyes just light up, and also using all of those experiences in your life to not define who you are, but it's just a part of your story to help you to be able to be a light to others who are going through similar situations, to be their most their best self.
Well, what I do know is that oftentimes we are operating from our younger self. So any experience that you've had between the 0 and 8 years old, you're programmed to respond or react in your life from that. So it becomes a pattern. That's why oftentimes victims of domestic violence go back to they actually have an energy that's trapped inside them that attracts the same kind of experience that they've had. Not what they want, but you become comfortable in the chaos and turmoil.
Right.
When we realize that everyone does the best that they can with what they know, then you stop blaming. And once we realize that we're doing the best that we can with all that we know, with all the love in our heart, then we're able to have more compassion for others. So like my dad, when he, like my birth dad shot at us and, there was a lot of violence and sexual abuse and emotional abuse. He didn't sexually abuse, but there were family members. I used to blame and resent and hate, and I felt shame so much. And now today, because of the work that I have done for myself, I just have deep compassion for everybody who has felt like they're not loved enough to react or respond in the world the way they do. So people react or respond unconsciously from the experiences they've had.
Right.
So if they're feeling unworthy, so my dad, I know, did better for me than what he experienced.
Right.
Today, I have deep love for all of my family members and just really am grateful that they just agreed to play this role in my life so I could be the best human that I can be here on this earth.
Right. I think that's wonderful. And, being able to look back and reflect on all of the, different events in your life, the people in your life, they're all teachers to us. Sometimes it's painful events, but as you do this emotional work, and I'm very much about going through, encouraging people to do the emotional work and facing it head on, because these experiences come into your life as a teaching, really a life teaching. It's, it's E plus R equals O. It's up to you to be able to respond to that in the best way that you can. You have the power to be able to decide how are you going to respond to that event.
Yeah. I have another teacher that I've worked with, and I think one of the things that I absolutely think is an opportunity to share with the world is that we never have to do this alone, that working with coaches or leaders or spiritual leaders or working with other people is absolutely necessary from my perspective. Another teacher of mine, her name's Jennifer Huff. She's amazing as well. She talks about every event is the opportunity to be curious about what's coming up to go. If there's energy that's coming up and it feels restrictive and tight and not freeing, then there's some untruth within your body that's being held from something that's ready to be seen so it can be dissolved and you can really live in your truth. So any decision that you're making, if it feels tight and restrictive, not out of fear of like, oh, should I do this? Don't stop doing things because you don't want to, like you're scared of doing something that might expand you. But it's more of like, if you're making a decision and you're feeling like it's really restrictive and you feel like you're pushing the boulder uphill, then that's information for you. That's feedback only. So you can decide like, oh, okay. So if this isn't in the highest and best for me, then universe, show me what is. Open and be curious about what's coming up to go.
Right. And I think that's so great that you brought up the sense of not doing things alone and having that sense of community. That's what I felt like I've been missing, is having that community of people to really, help guide and help me to reflect and go through experiences and to learn from that so I can make the best decisions for my life. This past weekend was so great because we had so many people who were on different journeys, but we were all supportive. Thank you for giving me your time and coaching over the weekend so I can reflect on a lot of things. And I'm going through all of the notes that I have, but it's so important to be able to have that community of people, either a mentor or a coach or a group of women that you can come together and talk to and bounce ideas off of and be able to help each other during these different seasons of our lives. So we have that support. So we're not flying solo alone because we really can't do life alone. We all need community. And just like the hugging exercise, I thought that was so transformational for me, not being the most huggiest person in the world. But it really opened my heart up to realize, like, man, I don't really get that many hugs. And I'm like, how am I surviving without, like, what? It was at 6 or 8 hugs a day to survive. I think that was the stat. And I'm like, I'm getting 0. So how am I walking around and surviving? And it just brought that awareness that, oh my gosh, I am missing that human connection that is a missing piece of my life that I need to do more of. Hence why I want to create this, self-care community for people to be able not only to be connected, but also to support each other during their different seasons of life. So good that you're sharing your wisdom with different people throughout the world. I love the energy work. I think there's so much that our body was just naturally built for, like gives us a lot of information. Can you go into detail of how you kind of got into that, the energy realm?
Sure. I've always been curious about the energy realm, mediums, intuitives. Like, I've always been curious about them. Even before my son took his life, I went to shamans and I had readings and I was curious about it. So I read a lot, but I never really embodied it until after Logan departed his human body. But when he departed, like, I started to be more open because I had such a desire. So I didn't say it here, but he died when he was angry at me and not talking with me, and actually wrote a note that included he didn't want me at his service. So I was desperate to stay connected. And at the time, I was like, I just want him to know how much I love him. I want him to know how sorry I am, like the whole self-blame thing here. And I was a good mom. So today I don't feel that, but in the moment you feel like I felt like I was responsible.
Absolutely.
And so when he departed, I started to get these signs like everywhere. My friend came to get me and she lived in Massachusetts at the time and I lived in Vermont, and she's like, you're not going to stay alone. You're coming with me. And so we're in the car and we're driving along and we look up and there is an LV in the clouds. Like the clouds have been written with the LV, and my son, Logan Boyer.
Wow.
We stopped to get gas. In the car in front of us, license plate said LV 33. LV, of course, is Logan's initials. 33 was my son's sports number.
Whoa, that's wild.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Those kinds of things just kept coming up. And I could give you story after story after story. And I was laying on his bed playing cribbage on my phone because that's what he and I used to do, is play cribbage. That was one of the things we loved to do together. And his cat was on the outside of the entrance at the door. The cat wouldn't cross across the threshold, but it would sit there and yawl and look up into, like, up near the light, and it was yawling and it kept cocking its head back and forth. So I put the game aside. I'm like, come on in, Paris or Hilton. Come on in, Hilton. Because the kids had 2 cats. One was named Paris and the other one was named Hilton.
Hilarious.
And so finally, Hilton leaped up into the air and his paws were out and he yowled. And it was like he was leaping toward a spirit. I knew Logan was there. So I rolled over on my side and just started crying. And then suddenly I felt his spirit spoon me and put his arm around me.
Oh my goodness. What a gift.
Yeah. So it was those little things that started. And so then I started to take courses and then, I kept seeing and feeling and hearing things. And another time I just shared that there was a little spirit girl, beside me. I'm like, there's a little girl here and I don't know whose it is. And then finally, the name of a person came up. So I called where she was. And I said, I don't know if she's open to this, but I need to stay, blah, 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 whatever it is. And I started to sharing, like, she's in this field with multiple colored flowers. It's not just daisies, it's flowers. And she is on a dress and she's twirling around. And so this woman says, my gosh, after her cancer treatments, she would want to go to this field and just twirl in the field. And I'm like, well, that's so those little things started to happen. So I
Wow.
started to trust it and develop it more with teachers and what have you.
That's amazing. I love that. Well, we're coming to the end of our time together. And again, I just want to thank you so much, Kathleen, for sharing your heart and your story with us and being able to touch so many lives together, hopefully with this podcast. And so if you can just share a way that people can get in contact with you if they need coaching or support.
So it's just my full name, CathleenElle.com. It's my website, and you can schedule a discovery call there. I host retreats, workshops. I am a speaker. I have a book called Shattered Together, A Mother's Journey from Grief to Belief, that if anybody's going through any experience, it doesn't have to be my experience. The book is a guide. There's daily practices that are included in each chapter. So where it's a guidebook for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Definitely check Kathleen out and connect with her. And I'm telling you, your heart and your life will be changed for the better. Kathleen, thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate it.
Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's been a pleasure to meet you, and it's just an honor to be here with you.
Yes, please stay.
You guys, wasn't that such a great podcast? Thank you so much, Cathleen Elle, for taking the time to join me on the Hot Tub Club podcast and sharing your story with us. If you're interested in connecting with Kathleen, please go to her website, CathleenElle.com. Connect to work with her with intuitive success coaching, join her on a retreat, or you can purchase her book, Shattered Together, through her website. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your inspiring story with all of us. Stay tuned for next week. We have another amazing show in tap for you. Make sure to click that subscribe button to our podcast. And remember, you are worthy of all great things in life, love and joy and everything in between. Let's make this the best journey ever. And I'll see you in the next podcast.